Hey guys, we're going to talk about the Chinese Civil War from 1927 to 1937. First of all, the introduction. We're first going to talk about the conflict that lasted between the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, and the Chinese Communist Party. Second, we're going to talk about how it shaped modern history of China. Third, how it emerged in the causation of the war. Fourth, the amidst of an era of transformation and how it marked shifts of power, ideology, and socioeconomic structures. Fifth, how it was a decade of struggle and it really impacted its citizens' international relations. And lastly, just the contest between the nationalists and the communists. So, a little bit on the background: the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, was founded by Sun Yat-sen in 1912, and they ruled mainland China from 1927 to 1949. They were referred to having a socialist ideology and focused on unifying China under a constitutional republic and modernizing the nation's institutions. A little bit of background on the Communist Party of China. The CCP was formed in 1921, and it was under the leadership of Mao Zedong, who ruled under a authoritarian political system, which really champions peasants' rights, worker empowerment, and a classist society. Now let's get into the causation. So some factors leading to the tension between the nationalists and the communists were ideological differences. So the nationalists aimed for a capitalist democratic model, while the communists sought for a proletarian revolution and classist society. Another factor is socioeconomic disparities. So the communists resonated with impoverished peasants and workers, addressing their long-standing grievances, and they also focused on addressing these disparities, how it resonated with the disfranchised, while the nationalists struggled to prioritize these issues. More on causation, the impact of external influences. So like foreign imperialism, foreign concessions, foreign powers' involvement, shifted national identity, so how they perceived encroachments on Chinese sovereignty by foreign powers, fostered a sense of national identity and unity, and also anti-Japanese sentiments. More on causation is mainly just how the communist side wanted to overall revolutionize, while the nationalist side wanted to overall rebuild the area and grow stronger from there. The country wasn't unified and was starting to lose its identity, while the rest of the world was like watching it unfold. So getting into the course of the events, one of the first events is the Northern Expedition. It was an expedition to consolidate power and reunify China. There were 3 phases in this event. The first phase is the initial advances and territorial gains, and next was the challenges and internal divisions, and third, the consolidation and nationalist authority. The next event that happened was the Shanghai Massacre in 1927. This was a very deadly killing. It was a mass killing. They had mass killings, purges, and executions in China. The nationalists turned against communists and labor unions in Shanghai, which resulted in very violent clashes, and how it really impacted ideological divide. The next was the Battle of Shang River. So the Battle of Shang River was held when the nationalists aimed to crush communist forces and eradicate their influences, but this really just showed the strategic brilliance of communists and how they used guerrilla tactics versus how the nationalists used conventional warfare. Next is encirclement campaigns. So the nationalists launched a series of campaigns against communist strongholds, and despite heavy losses, communists actually gained support from peasants, adapting guerrilla tactics and mobile tactics to counter the conventional strength of the national forces.
The Long March is the time from 1934 to 1935 where the Nationalist Party of China started to heavily attack the Communist Party, which ended up making the Communist Party start to retreat back and basically cause them to weaken down more or less. And basically during this time, a lot of people ended up getting killed as a lot of fighting ended up happening. But that's due to the Nationalist Party, especially due to the leader, Chiang Kai-shek, which is also important inside the Xi'an incident, whenever Chiang Kai-shek ended up getting detained and thrown into jail by the Communist Party just a year afterwards as an attempt for the Communist Party to end up gaining a lot of power, which ended up becoming successful as the only way they would let Chiang Kai-shek out of prison at that time was by agreeing to give the Communist Party a lot more power. And this was a huge turning moment because this helped the Communist Party get more power and kind of ended the Civil War at the time. But quickly off to the side, besides the Civil War, was very important, beginning right here with the Marco Polo Bridge incident, where the China and Japan, both countries first started fighting with one another, kind of also causing World War II battles between them and future battles between them in Asia. Not so much that what happened in the battle is important, but just the two countries fighting, and even though they did end up having a truce at the end, they ended up fighting, and that caused more battles later on, and this is a very significant moment prior to everything else that happens later on. One of the big turning points, especially for the Communist Party, was the person who basically changed it for them, was Mao Zedong. He basically had all these new strategies, especially during the Long March whenever the communists were trying to flee and trying to gain their power back. He's the one that basically helped them gain prominence, focus on making new strategies, and basically brought them back up to power. The outbreak of the full-scale Japanese invasion is also important because basically this is what happened after that Marco Polo Bridge incident. And this is from right here starting onward. This is when the fighting happened with China versus Japan. And this is basically just continues all the way on through World War II. And it's very important because at the time, even though the Civil War was still happening and the Communist Party is slowly gaining more power, both parties have to come together and fight off a foreign country and an enemy power. The main result was the Communist Party did gain a lot of strength, and they kind of did ended up taking over. They ended up having new redistribution policies, getting their own policies to finally come through, which wasn't being allowed to happen before that. Also let them just create their own base areas, which also gave them more power over the land, because beforehand they were not getting all the power that they needed. And then obviously, since one side is going up, the other side has to go down, especially in the Civil War. The Nationalist Party did ended up losing a lot of its power. They're very unorganized. They weren't able to fight back against the Communist Party. And because of that, they ended up losing basically all their power, and the Communist Party basically just took over. And then also another big result is again, going to the side here with the Japanese invasion. Very important because middle of a civil war, and you're also fighting inside your country and outside with an enemy nation. This is very important because now that the Communist Party took over, Mao Zedong, he has to try to figure out how to fight against them, as now he is the main ruler. He has to fight against Japan, and he has to basically protect the country, which is very important as he's the new ruler. He has to make himself look good. He has to make the country look good, so he cannot fail during this war that is happening. Again, just to go over as a total of the results, the communist bases, all of that gave them lots of power, making them more of a long-term power, especially with popularity and credibility. The people saw it as a better opportunity. It's basically caused them to stay much longer and have most of the power. International impact, nationalists did end up retreating to Taiwan. Most of them did because they didn't have much of the power at the end of the Civil War. But China did end up having to not become allies anymore with the U.S., as during World War II they were allies with them to fight against Japan. But now that they were an official communist party afterwards, officially the U.S. did not want to have to do anything a part of them. They did not want to be allies with a communist country. But even though they were allies with them in World War II, as on the slide is written, the U.S. had an alliance with them. That was only to fight against Japan at the time, which Japan did end up losing because of that. But afterwards, China became an official communist country, and the U.S. did not have anything to do with that, leading them to side with Japan because they do not want a communist as their allies.